I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but this has started to sound a little bit funny. It's a hairdryer, obviously. Now, I'm not sure if that comes over, but there is a sort of high-pitched squealy noise somewhere in here. Maybe something rubbing or a dry bearing, so I'm going to have a look. Obviously the world would end if I took this apart, so they've put some sort of super security screwy things in here. You need one of these to undo it. Absolutely ridiculous the way they put these tamper-proof things on here. I mean, who do they think is going to take them apart anyway? Looks like a bit of levering is going to be involved, so I'll have to move the camera out of the way. It looks like this cap comes off, so I don't know if that's going to help us get in. Oh, maybe it's to make it easier to clean. But I don't think all the dust in it is what's causing the problem. Oh, well, I never knew that. But so far, this is proving reluctant to part company. I can get it that far. But I can't seem to get any further than that. I think maybe there's there's plastic catches, I bet. I did buy a pry bar for doing just this sort of thing, but it's a bit flimsy, and the end of this ruler seems a lot better. There must be another. There we go. I just moved you up a bit, so I've got a bit more room to move. Well, we've got a fair bit of dust. Who knew hair was so dusty? A lot more dust. And I think, as per usual, all we've actually got is heating elements inside there and a motor with a fan blowing straight down there, and as long as the airflow through there matches the heat output, it doesn't blow up. Not sure where the noise could be coming from, but my best guess is that it's a dry bearing with the motor, because I can't see any clearance issues with this part. It all looks as if it would turn. There's no obvious sign of anything rubbing. So I think I need to get a little bit of oil into the bearing of that motor if it's possible. I'll see if this will lift off. I can't quite see how it would come off. Being plastic, of course, it could end up in a pile of pieces. It looks like this part will actually slide out as one unit, There's all the heating coils in there, but it still doesn't help very much because I still can't see any way to get to the end of the motor. I can't shift this. It's obviously been pressed on and it doesn't want to press off. I think it might break, so what I'm going to try and do is see if I can get a tiny drop of oil in round the back and see if it will run down. Not ideal, but I'm not sure there's any other way of getting down to where the bearing is. This is very thin oil. Right, that's 3 drops. Let's see if I can encourage them to run down. Obviously I don't want oil dripping out of the end of this, so we need the minimum amount of oil in there possible. This is entirely by guesswork, obviously, because I've got no way of knowing if any of that oil is actually going to get down to where the bearing is. Because my guess is that there'll be a tiny little brass bearing in the end of the motor where the shaft sticks out. And it's just a pity that there's no obvious way of pulling this off and getting to it. I mean, it turns quite smoothly. Now, if any of the oil has gone down to there, then with a bit of luck it will actually work its way in once it's spinning. But of course, if it's near the edge, it's just going to get thrown out rather than go in. So it's a difficult one to assess. But it could be my imagination, but that does feel slightly better. But again, that could just be wishful thinking. Right, let's try and get this back in here. Not quite sure how that fitted in there, but we'll... I don't want to turn my big compressor on just for the sake of a little bit of dust that's in here, so I'm just going over with a paintbrush, trying to get the worst of it off. I don't think the small amount that's in there is going to be that detrimental, because I think that the dust that probably was the problem was already down in amongst the motor spindle anyway, and that of course is the part I can't get to, but that still seems to be spinning reasonably alright. Interestingly enough, I did find a stray wire from this live terminal just poking up into the air. Only a tiny little strand, but I've cut that off. Oh, that looks like a hair. The hair won't matter. Right, now we need to clean this bit. And again, I think the amount of dirt and dust in here is minimal, so I don't think this could have possibly had any real effect on anything. It's amazing the amount of dust that there must be around that ends up being poured into the hairdryer. I'm told it's all skin cells from our bodies, but I know the less we say about that, the better, I suspect. Right, just need to get these back in. If I was going to regularly be taking this to pieces, I would probably put ordinary screws in, but as I don't suppose this thing has got a great deal of life in it and can't be repaired very easily anyway, I don't think it matters if I leave the security ones in. Right, let's plug it back in. Right, that's plugged in. Oh, well, it's doing a good job of... No, the extra noise I was hearing is still there buzzing. Can you hear it? It's got a high pitch, like a wasp stuck in there. It's working fine, but there's that extra buzzing noise. Right, I've pulled it apart and I doubt if you can see, but down just there is the other end of the motor. So I'm going to try and put a couple of drops of oil on there, but I wouldn't want to put money on it getting into the right spot. But oh, I've just remembered I have got I made this tiny little oiler from one of those kits that you get for putting ink into cartridges, which I could never get on with anyway. I wonder if I can get a little drop of oil right down in there. Whatever the noise is, it's not there on slow speed. But if I go up to middle speed, you hear it? But it's only when you shake it. And now it's gone. Oh well, you can't fix everything. Okay, third try of trying to take this Revlon hairdryer to pieces and work out why it makes a strange vibrating noise. This is one of those don't try this at home jobs. Got the motor out, it's a little 12 volt DC motor, at least I think it's 12 volts. Works fine on 12 volts. That goes in there and there are two screws that hold it in. The bad part is the impeller, or the propeller, whatever you want to call it, that sits on there and it's a push fit, which means getting that off is a nightmare. I probably spent an hour slowly prising at that to try and get it off. Now the reason I tried to get this piece apart is because, and I don't think it will show up in the camera, but there is a crack there between the main body and here. Oh, and don't be fooled by the clear cleanliness of this. This has had a good 20 minutes scrub to try and get all the carbon off it. There's a crack there. That one possibly is cracked there, and this one for definite is cracked all the way across, almost all the way through. The strange thing is, it doesn't feel like it's going to come apart, but of course what could be happening is it could be just flexing enough to vibrate as it spins, and that could be the weird horrible noise that it's making. So what I'm going to do is put some super glue at the points where the cracks are, and then I might have a go at putting a little bit of 2-pack adhesive on each part to reinforce it. I'm not sure about that yet, but I'm certainly going to do the super glue trick first. Right, as I said, it's not that easy to see where the crack is. Sometimes the light catches it where I can see it perfectly now, but I don't know that if anybody else can. But I'm going to try and put a little bit of glue there, and basically it's hope that it will go into the crack, because there's no way I can make it go into the crack. I just have to hope it gets sucked into the crack. And the same there. This one, not so sure whether that's a crack or just a mark in the plastic, but I'm going to put some there anyway just in case. And then this one seems to be the worst of the lot. The crack is quite long, goes right across there. So again, now as I say, I don't know if that is going to go into the crack or not. I've noticed with clear plastic in the past and with glass, if you can get the glue to go into the crack, it makes it look almost invisible. So I'm guessing that the plastic crack is still there on this side, because I can still see it. So I'm going to put a little bit more from this side, and I'll go around and do exactly the same thing. Say that there's some glue on both sides. It's a bit of overkill this, but of course I can't judge how much glue is going to come out of the bottle, so it's just a matter of splosh it on and hope for the best. Right, now that's got super glue all over. I think it will be okay if I just leave it like that for the glue to go hard, and then once that's gone hard I'll have a think about whether we need to put some 2-pack on it to reinforce it. Maybe we don't need it. I'm going to mix up a tiny amount of epoxy and literally put the smallest amount I can get away with just on the joint where each part goes together, so that where each of these joins the main body. As I mentioned in a previous video, this is not 5-minute epoxy. This takes a couple of hours to cure, so I'll be mixing this up probably for 5 minutes, and then I'll try putting some on. Right, I do realise that this is vaguely balanced, I suppose, so putting some epoxy on it is possibly going to affect the balance when it spins. I'm hoping that if I've got such a small amount that it's really not likely to have a massive effect on the amount of weight, and therefore a huge effect on the balance. But of course it might do. I mean, it might be a seriously bad thing to do, I don't know. But let's face it, no one in their right mind would repair a cheap hairdryer anyway, so it hardly matters how this comes out in the end. It's more for interest than it is for any other reason. It just seems a terrible shame that in this day and age everything you buy, it lives a certain number of years if you're lucky, and then you just have to throw it away. And I think I would prefer to live in a society where things were repaired. That's not the world that we live in. Now ideally I'd like to turn this over and put some on the other side, but I've got a sneaky feeling that that's not going to be possible. Because this stuff doesn't seem fantastically runny, but I'm pretty sure that if I turn this, just need some more right on the end, if I turn this upside down, the one thing you can guarantee it will do is run everywhere. Right, like I say, some more on that side would be ideal, but I'm not sure I dare. I don't know if I can. I suppose it might be possible to hold it like that for a few minutes and put some on the underside. There isn't a lot left from what I've made up. But of course all we're really talking about is a tiny bit of reinforcement. I mean, it's not as if we're trying to get some kind of mega gluing going on here. We're just trying to get a tiny little bit of reinforcement where there is none currently. But like I say, I'm not 100% sure what this will do to the balance, so if when we go to start it up it makes a lot more noise than it ever did, and we know we've got a problem. Right, I think it's time to abandon any more. Just need that to sit there and dry. But like I say, that will probably take the rest of the day, and it's not the world's prettiest job, but with luck it will work. And that is simply a press fit on the end of that brass piece on there. And this, you can see, to take it off I had to unsolder everything. All it is a bridge rectifier across these two terminals, and then the mains coming into the bridge rectifier, and the bridge rectifier is just simply some diodes and a capacitor shoved into that space. It's nothing very clever. Here's the bridge rectifier part. There's 4 diodes in there, and that was the capacitor that was across the diodes, and that's it. So this part, this takes 240 volts AC, and then this simply rectifies that down to something the motor can use. I'm assuming that somewhere along the way the use of the bridge rectifier allows the motor to run at a different voltage, unless this runs at a different voltage as well. But there doesn't actually appear to be any kind of voltage control built into the rest of the thing, so it must be simply something to do with the resistance of all of this, which allows this part here to run at 12 volts. Right, here we are 24 hours later. Not the world's tidiest, nicest looking glue, and I hope it hasn't put this thing out of balance by too much. That just needs to be pressed back onto there without breaking. So that will be my next trick. Right, here I'm testing the motor. That's just the motor with nothing on the end. I can't hear anything strange, so that would suggest that the noise wasn't coming from the motor itself. Right, now this, it will actually slide on. You can feel that's just gone on like that. Right, this is the setup I've opted for. I've got the vice nut down there, piece of aluminium there. It's somewhat terrifying because, of course, as soon as I go too far, I suspect it's just going to smash. Right, now I didn't measure how far down these blades looked before, so I'll just have to assume that that's as far down as they were. I daren't push any harder against this because it'll just, you know, it'll smash and I'll have a pile of pieces. Right, I just need to try this now on the 12 volt supply to see how this sounds. Right, there we have fan. Seems to be working okay. Can't hear any funny noises if I shake it about. So I think we'll have to assume that that is okay. Right, next I have to get that end there. I don't even know if you can see this because it's so blooming fiddly, but I have to get that end there and that end there with those two diodes onto one part of one side of the motor, and then these two diode ends need to go to the other side, and then this little ceramic capacitor goes across both. I'm never going to be able to put that in there with that and solder it with the camera watching, so you may have to take my word for that bit. If I can get it to a point where it's partly assembled, I'll bring the camera around, but you can see that this has got to be in there, and then while it's in there I've got to attach this and I've got to solder the whole lot together, so it's going to be difficult to do and almost impossible with the camera in the way. To give you some idea of how fiddly this is, that has got to go in there, and then that has got to go in there, so that part has got to sit in there, and now I need two diodes in there and two diodes in there. Of course, when it was done at the factory, the diodes had long legs and this had long legs, so it was much easier, but trying to connect these little short stubby legs into there is not going to be fun. And as you don't want to see a grown man cry, I didn't show you this, but there's one solder joint just there, and you'll have to take my word for it, the other one is on the other side. Moment of truth. Does it sound any different? Yes! Again, I don't know if you can tell, but the extra buzzing is gone. It sounds like it always did. Thanks for watching.